was going to captain the ship in my absence this week. I was supposed to be on holiday and a cruise, but I caught COVID before we left, and so I'm at my desk. And so, but we're gonna let Reed do a few things here. I wanted to update people. Yesterday, I sent out the list of providers to each community, each county, and hopefully that adds a little clarity about that. We're assembling a fresh list of contacts for the large companies, and so we can we'll provide those to you, so you don't have to call 1-800 AT&T or something, and hope to be able to reach somebody of purpose. And same thing with companies like Charter and Frontier and Comcast. And, the smaller companies, pretty easy to call their front desk and ask for the general manager, or maybe even do a little work in advance and Google, find out who the general manager of the company is, and be able to reach them directly, or at least somebody pretty high up that chain of command, knowing that they're local. And so we'll be getting that to you hopefully by the end of this week. And I think I've talked about this. There's people on that list, and you say, well, oh man, they're a crummy provider. They've been crummy since the internet began. And you may say, well, why would we even meet with them? Number one, because they are still there, which is a purpose to do that. But also then to check a box that says, hey, we've reached out to everybody here, and we've left no stone untouched, unturned in our pursuit of better broadband. And so reaching out, interviewing them, giving them that bit of courtesy, I think is a smart way to go. We've had other communities announce projects, and then the providers say they never even talked to us, and it just looks bad in the newspaper. And you're going to be trying to mold public opinion about your broadband projects and so on. So it's just really an important part to touch base with all those folks. The big cell providers, Verizon Wireless, that's really less important. I think they're pretty untouchable in terms of reaching them and them being responsive to requests for improvements. So we really focus on the wired and then the fixed wireless, the local folks that are providing service on for the best bang for your buck for the interviews. And again, I'd remind you that it's better to go as a team for that, either to have them come meet with your team or go meet them on their turf, but with a group. It just is a little more powerful message to have several folks with you, as opposed to a one-on-one thing. In addition, as we all know, people hear different things when, we can all sit in the room and listen to a person, and some folks might be able to pick up on some nuance, be able to ask a good probing question, and so on. So that's all I'll say on that. I had a request, the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, is running out of money. They've really now won't sign anyone else up for the program at this point. And really, there's only a couple months left, I think, of funding to meet the current demand. And so I had a question about that, because certainly affordability is a big part of building a business case for infrastructure investment. That if you have service that people can't afford, then they're not going to subscribe. That means it's a tougher road to hoe for the providers. And so helping to build the case that take rate is important, affordability is a part of that. Hillary, what's the latest on ACP?
Well, as you said, unfortunately, the program is running out of money. So yesterday, the 7th, was the last day to enroll, and we are looking at potentially, hopefully, we'll get to the end of April before that benefit will completely run out. We have some official guidelines to be sending out to folks for wind down. So say, someone decides, well, if I don't have this benefit, I'm not going to be able to afford it. I would like to cancel my service. no provider no provider can charge, say, a cancellation fee or anything like that. There are also options to opt in. So if, say, the $30 benefit covered your entire subscription and you've never had to physically pay for that benefit, you can work that out with the provider so that you can, put your information in. There wouldn't be any extra charges for becoming a new customer, for example, that sort of thing and all that. So I've got some print materials that I'm going to send out. It's got guidance not only for your local residents, but also if you have anyone who is doing grant-funded ACP outreach. We have our digital navigators that work throughout the state, and that's been their main goal, their main job. So they're shifting a little bit. They're still going to be in the communities working with digital skill building. They're still going to be in the communities helping folks with this wind down process and helping them find, potential local benefits. I know that there is an ACP Extension Act that's been introduced. As we all may know, passing a budget this year is going to be a challenge in general. So it may get wrapped up in a lot of that. And so we're not really holding our breath that anything gets passed before April. But we're crossing our fingers because it's got massive bipartisan support, not only from, nonprofits and community leaders, but also from elected officials, from ISPs, because they want to keep their subscribers, they're getting that benefit from the federal government. So they want to keep that and have more subscribers. So I do not know what the future of that looks like, but I do have materials to send out to you, and you're welcome to share them out in the world. And I can also, if you are interested in sending, speaking to your elected officials and just letting them know that we support this, we support the ACP program, we need more affordability in the broadband space. There are several ways to do that, but one of the ones that we're working on is this. Here we go. It's called don'tdisconnectus.org. It has a really big red button that says take action and can help you with some language if you want to send an email to your for your governors, for your elected officials. There's also fivecalls.org. That one is really, really helpful for you put in your address and it pulls your representative so you don't have to find them in separate places. We're still working on that, but that's where we are right now.
Good. Thank you, Hillary.
Yeah. And if anyone has any questions, let us know. And if anyone has any ideas, let us know.
Well, I see Jessica Black and Vicki Becker are making themselves available for assistance on that in the chat. And so,
yeah, they're two of our navigators and they are powerhouses. So whatever you need, they can also help out.
Good. I'd like to remind people that, prior to the pandemic, there was affordability programs offered by the largest providers where for $10 a month, folks would be able to get an internet connection, Comcast Internet Essentials. We've all kind of forgotten about that and what a great deal this program has been for the providers. In the past, $10 a month for, I think Comcast was 50 megs when they upgraded that for the pandemic. And most of those programs were $10 from the biggest providers. So they were doing that on their own. And maybe if ACP doesn't get reinstalled, we can get those programs back reinstated. Although I suspect the companies probably like their $30 price point better than their $10. But they are, and this is where public action sometimes, now I'm editorializing, but the public action to become a public sector provider is a powerful tool, because that is something that a city like Chattanooga, with their public network, they just decided to make internet free for every school kid in their community through this that was prior to the ACP program. So there are margins in this industry that can support affordability, and we just need to have a push to make that happen. So good. And I see some chat there in the about who is who. So I'll send out contact information. We've got a list of all the coordinators, and I'll send that to the coordinator groups. So everyone has, like Macon County's asking who the contact is for Logan County, and that's Kathy Brown, I'm pretty sure. So, but we'll send out those email lists so you guys can reach out to each other as well. Reed, do you want to introduce our guest today?
Sure, yeah. And I'll share my screen really quick. So we have the slides up. Everyone see that look good? Great. So happy to introduce and happy to have Hillary Cherry of Calix with us. Calix is a leader in providing services to ISPs, management products for them, and software so that they can deliver good service. Hillary is the field marketing senior manager, and I have learned this morning, despite serving all of North America, lives in Logan County. So kind of a fun serendipitous moment for us. And with that, I'm excited to hear her give an overview of fiber broadband and rural broadband for us. So take it away, Hillary.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Reed, and thank you, Bill, for asking me to be here today. And also to the Illinois Soybean Association for sponsoring this program. This is a great opportunity. And as Reed said, I am a Logan County resident. So I am really excited to be able to speak. This is an opportunity I don't get as often. My role at Calix is I'm responsible for helping telephone cooperatives and independently owned local exchange carriers who provide broadband services. So a lot of them are rural telcos to develop their successful go-to-market strategies and elevate their overall broadband subscriber experience. So in addition to many years of working within the telecommunications industry, I hold a bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois at Springfield and a certificate in organizational leadership from Illinois State University. I'm excited to share with you today. I'm obviously an Illinois girl. I'm born and raised, reside in Logan County. And I volunteer in a lot of ways in my community. So just a little more background on me. I was a founding member of the Mount Pulaski Economic Development and Planning Board. I was a volunteer firefighter and EMT for over a decade. And I am currently serving and have served for over a decade as the public representative of the Logan County Emergency Telephone Services Board, the E911 board. So in addition to volunteering, I enjoy just being a part of my community, watching sports, gardening, and spending time with my family. So, but my full-time job is working for Calix and working with a lot of providers to help them bring great broadband services to their community. So Reed, you can go to the next slide, please. So I want to talk about why fiber is important, just to start out. So how you deliver a service and the equipment you use inside and outside the subscriber's premise, which is like their home, business, or other location, is extremely important. You know, in the early 90s, we all had dial-up service. It was anything but instant. I still can think like how it tied up your phone line and the sound that it made when it was trying to connect. That transitioned to digital subscriber lines, DSL, and then the progression of technology brought us to coax cable, wireless networks, and fiber optic cable. So I recently, within the last 9 years, moved from a little town called Cumberland, Illinois. I don't know if everyone knows where that's at, but less than 100 people in the town. We moved from there to Mount Pulaski, which is actually my hometown. So we made that move due to the fact that I was on call 24/7 for work, and I needed better, more reliable internet access. So I think that plays into the fact that 67% of rural America choose where they live based on access to reliable high-speed internet connection. It's higher for the entire country, but for rural America, or it's higher for urban areas, rural America at 67%. So people are really looking at communities, looking at where they live based on what is available to them. Also, there's a 1.5% increase in high-speed broadband access, and it can result in greater than or approximate to a 1.5% increase in your annual per capita growth, which I think is really interesting. The town I live in right now is served by Frontier, by Comcast. So we have a couple of options for internet. And as of yesterday, I have fiber. So we have 2 fiber providers currently in our town. But as of yesterday, I am currently on fiber here working from home. So what's the big difference that I will say as far as like the high-speed internet connection is it's obviously much faster than my cable internet. I don't struggle now. I've noticed a big change in the network congestion. And so I'm seeing better service as far as I don't have a lot of bandwidth interruptions. I'm not seeing latency and buffering and things like that. So that is a benefit of that. We can advance to the next slide. So why should we be considering fiber? So some technologies out there, whether it be if you're looking at specifically at cable or at if you're looking at fixed wireless, 5G wireless, satellite, some of them struggle to offer multi-gigabit speeds, but many are offering this already through fiber. The capacity is unmatched to other different types of technology. So you can use, they use cables containing small glass fibers to transmit data using light waves. And because these fibers are so small, they're actually the size of a human hair. They're so tiny that each cable contains multiple fiber strands, and it allows them to transmit huge amounts of data over those cables. Also, because for installation purposes, the fibers are so small, the cables are more flexible than something like coax cable. The performance is extremely fast and offers symmetrical speeds, so the same up and the same down speeds for both downloading and uploading. And obviously, as I mentioned on the previous slide, there's high bandwidth opportunities. It can accommodate multiple devices, has low latency. And as far as longevity, compared to cable and some other formats out there that might need upgraded in a more frequent time frame, fiber is more robust. It's resistant to interference and signal loss, has lower equipment cost, and it's estimated to last for up to 100 years. The other benefit is that it's not impacted by things, because it's buried, it's not impacted a lot of times by weather and other conditions that you might see with other technology. So it also has low power consumption and doesn't require electricity to operate. So better in the sense of outages, and it has lower maintenance costs. Some of the cons to fiber include higher upfront costs to build and deploy though. So at the upfront part of fiber is a little bit more expensive. So next slide. Oh, and I apologize, my title, it should say factors driving fiber deployment. I don't know why it slightly shifted there, but So why should we look at fiber deployment? What is important about this? Well, subscriber needs are changing and people are working from home. They have been at a much higher rate since the pandemic. There is also a multitude of streaming services that are out there now. A lot of people have the term cut the cable and went to streaming services such as Hulu, Netflix, YouTube TV. There's also a lot of devices connected in each person's house. I think as of the 2020 census data, the average person had 25 devices connected. In my household, we have over 50. And that is just amazing to me. I went around and tried to count how many devices we had connected, and we have over 50. So not only does the technology need to accommodate the subscriber needs of today, but also the future needs that you are planning for in your community. So the needs to deliver subscribers an always-on experience without lag, buffering, freezing, interruption is extremely important. And here I show mostly residential. By subscribers, I don't just mean residential. I'm talking about the local businesses. I'm talking about your community areas. Any area that could be served through fiber is important to know what your subscribers' needs are. So whether you're working from home, your children are doing remote learning, whether it's telehealth, could be a new opportunity for students such as esports programs. There's a huge amount of esports coming into, and by esports, I actually mean it's a team sport, and they get together and they play video games against other teams. So it's not necessarily like you would think Wii bowling or something like that. It's actually playing video games against other teams. And we're seeing a lot of schools pick this up as a service in order to give their children another option of ways to compete. And colleges are also looking at these students. So that's a program that could be down the road implemented in your community. Obviously, the bandwidth and speed must be able to accommodate all that people want to do. And so you don't, as I'm talking to a lot of people who are in city and county roles, you think of internet, you should think of internet as another utility, another piece of your infrastructure. So you don't want to put in infrastructure into your towns and cities that would be obsolete in 5 to 10 years, and then have to spend taxpayers' dollars to go in again and update that infrastructure. You want to make sure that you're planning properly and know what you're planning for so that you have the right amount of bandwidth and the right amount of speed. And just to clarify, bandwidth is the amount of data and speed is the measure in which the data is moved. So you want to make sure that you have all of that so you can accommodate all the different programs. So I'll go into bandwidth a little more. I don't know how much you have gone into on this, but bandwidth is comparable to lanes on a highway. So I like to use this analogy as if you think of a bigger city and you have multiple lanes on the highway. So your bandwidth is how many lanes you have. 2 lanes, 4 lanes, 6 lanes. That's your bandwidth. The speed is your flow of traffic, how quickly people are moving down that highway. So so as we're looking at bandwidth and speed, you have to take that into account for how your users are going to use the internet and what technology you want to put in. A couple of community-wide connectivity examples that I have that are not specifically to residential are, we have some of our customers that we have seen do what Bill just mentioned on the schools in Chattanooga, providing internet access to every student in their service area. We actually have some that have done community-wide connectivity and offered a passcode for the students to log in for free and do their remote learning. Another thing that has been more recent that has occurred is the use of fiber services to help first responders in responding to locations in which radio or cell phone technology is not the greatest. So one example is we have a community that we serve, that one of our customers serves, and they had community-wide service, so fiber to the home, and the first responders ran an EMS call and went to this location. And when they got there, their radios weren't working well. They didn't have a great signal. I've been there. It does happen in Logan County. And their cell phones weren't working because the tower coverage was not adequate in that area. They were able to log on to the network that was a shared network that they had in town and had access to as first responders a lot at the house, which was the same broadband service provider. And they were able to do all their transmission, talk to the hospital, talk to everyone they needed to in order to get that person properly treated and transmitted to the right hospital and everything. So there are uses outside of this that are quite interesting. So go ahead and proceed to the next slide. So I want to talk about it from the operator perspective. So fiber is important from an operator perspective because obviously of your multiple customer segments. I mentioned, schools, first responders, community, those all fall into the community service. It could be that you're serving a local park. It could be that you're serving an arena, a football stadium, things like that. Could be your residential subscribers. So people at home. It could be business subscribers, everything from small to large businesses. And then bandwidth and capacity and low latency are really important when we're talking about the smart grid modernization. So there are a great reduction in power outage due to this because one, fiber is not reliant on electricity. So if it does go out, it's less impacted and it is still able to communicate data. So if you have an electrical outage, it can report issues with that grid infrastructure and enable applications that provide monitoring and real-time proactive data to go back and proactively look at why there's an outage or that there may be an outage. And then it also allows operators to monetize on 5G services, cellular densification through wireless backhaul. So fiber runs to the majority of the towers, and because the fiber runs to the majority of the towers, they connect the 5G service and then send the 5G wirelessly from there. So it allows more people to be connected to the subnetwork. So it also is lower operational expenses by allowing you to focus on the customer experience. Because the data is moving so fast, it's like having a Lamborghini instead of a Model T. So your customer experience is better because they're going to be able to have speed in both directions. They're going to be able to upload and download at the same rate. Previously, we were seeing more people just downloading. When streaming services first came out, people were downloading the television programs, the movies, such as Netflix, and they were watching them. Now, providers such as Roku and others have interactive programs built in to their streaming services. So you still have the same, you have both download and upload going in at the same time. Also, reducing operational expenses is the availability of your network to withstand environmental and technical issues. Fiber is much more robust. It's easier to install. It's not affected so much by distance, such as a fixed wireless would be. It's not as much impacted by weather noise, or even line of sight interference. So it is also seen as a more sustainable to be produced. So it's seen as a green technology, which I think is kind of interesting. It's more green than a lot of the other technologies out there. So the other thing is that fiber, from an operator perspective, it's redundant. You can add redundant feeds to it where the subscriber would never even know. So two strands of fiber carrying the same amount of data, and they're redundant to each other, so that if one goes down, you have that redundancy to keep things going. Next slide. Hey, Reed.
Is that not going?
No, it didn't go to
Oh.
the next slide.
Weird.
Sorry. And it's not full screen either, so I don't know.
Oh.
It's okay. So
Reed, you might want to stop sharing and then reshare.
Yeah,
there we go.
sorry about that.
We'll get it going. It's all right. It's a transition slide anyway. So so I just want to talk about a little bit of how so the physical internet obviously is networks of miles and miles of cable that stretch across our continents and our ocean floor. But how does that get to the end subscriber on a fiber network? So go ahead and advance to the next slide. So we start with tier 1 network operators who run the broadband infrastructure. And there's only about a dozen tier 1 operators in the world. And those includes AT&T, Lumen, Verizon, Sprint. And then, so the tier 1 providers give access to the smaller providers by leasing, the smaller providers, lease access from the tier 1 providers. And then they run internet exchange points to basically get the connectivity. So they receive the internet from what we call middle mile providers, and then we redistribute it to the last mile. So what I'm going to talk about here is redistributing it to the last mile. So it starts with the data center or central office. They're kind of, the terms are called that interchangeably. And those contain like your server racks, your optical line terminals, and we can refer to those as ONTs. They control your passive optical network traffic. They connect you to the network from the middle mile to the last mile. And they also manage the optical network terminals, which we call ONT devices. So at the OLT level, the optical line terminal level, splitters inside the cabinet or node enable the cables to be split off to multiple subscriber homes. So then, which is where we see the optical splitter, and then at the subscriber's home, the cable ends at the optical network terminal. And so the ONT acts as a translator. It turns the signal into a usable internet connection for that home. So then the subscriber is able to access the internet by one of two ways. They can access it by basically a direct connection to the Ethernet, or via Wi-Fi. In a fiber network, the access link obviously is the passive optical network. I didn't really explain that very much depth. So the OLT is on the service provider network, and the ONT connects the passive optical network and separates the service provider from the customer premises. So if you look at this picture, everything to the left of the ONT would be the service provider, and then the ONT to the house is the connection to the customer premises. Let's see. I probably also, the OLT controls packets of data. And so I said that they were symmetrical. So they, on a fiber network, they're the same up, the same down. And they can connect directly to the edge router, or they can connect through an aggregation node in the transport network. Also, one fiber from a central office can connect many homes, businesses, and community areas. So go ahead and advance to the next slide. So what are the outside plant architectures? So this is basically what you are going to see in your central office. What is in, if it's in cabinets or if it is in an outdoor hardened space that the broadband service provider puts in place in order to basically split the fiber required. So centralized office splitters are, I'll start with that. They're placed in the outside plant to reduce the overall amount of fiber required. This is often seen in urban areas, and you'll see here it's a 1:32 splitter. So one strand of fiber is split 32 ways to serve 32 customers. It's very future-proof and easy to change the technology. The monitoring and maintenance on this may require additional infrastructure. So because it's one box serving 32, it could require more, and it's in the central office, it could require more maintenance. The distributed split. So this is more of a suburban environment. So more of a subdivision, more home locations. This is where the OLT port that we saw in the last slide is connected and spliced directly to the outside plant fiber. So the first level of splitting is installed in a closure not far from the central office. You often see these just smaller boxes out there, and the second level resides in a terminal box closer to the subscriber premises. Often these could be pole mounted, they could be strand mounted, just in different depends on how the operator sets it up. It reduces the splitter cabinet requirements, and it has fewer monitoring and maintenance capabilities. But you'll see here that we have it. So the first connection splits into 4, and then each one of those splits in to a total of 32. So active Ethernet. This is your point-to-point fiber architecture. It's a direct connection between each OLT and ONT at the fiber strand. So it allows shared architecture of gigabit speeds without concerns of sharing any other equipment or architecture. So it's more of a large business. You're going to see more of this in a direct connection, a one-to-one. A distributed tap. This is what we see more in a rural environment. So optical couplers, they divert a portion of the input, so the light power, and optical splitters, they equally split the fiber, the diverted light, into drop outputs. And so this is where it's splitting each one, and it's a 1:32 ratio. It's just a different way to set up that architecture. So let's see. So when building the network, you have to take into assumptions based on what your expected peak utilization is, and make sure that you are building it out to your growth expectations in the future. So for example, depending on what you expect your community to grow to, what you expect to serve in the future, you want to build that architecture accordingly. You want to make sure you plan. If you're expecting a very large amount of economic growth, you need to plan a different way than if you're planning to only serve your existing community and not have growth. So it's important that everyone knows their service area. What is the geographic landscape? What are the environmental conditions? What's the availability of your existing infrastructure and the types of premises that you will need to house everything? And also, I heard Bill talking earlier about estimated take rates. You need to know that, and obviously your local codes and regulations when you're looking at your outside plant architecture planning. So go ahead and proceed to the next slide. So rural areas are obviously very different than our dense urban areas. And I mentioned that I work with a lot of telephone cooperatives, and in some situations, telephone cooperatives are maximizing their reach on their PON network in order to use a combination of technology to best serve their subscribers. So they're looking at what the geographic location is and the cost of the fiber install, and trying to figure out what the best options are to serve their subscriber base. So in this example, we're looking at they have the fiber ring. It's the fibers represented by a solid line on this diagram. So they have the fiber ring there. They're connecting the fiber to fixed wireless access points that are located, for example, on water towers, could be on other radio towers, on the top of grain elevators, bins, and they increase their subscriber reach by 3 times. So this is one way, and we see it in a lot of rural areas, that this is how a lot of the providers are going out there. They're using fiber and they're combining it with fixed wireless access points to reach their subscribers. So you can advance to the next slide. So another thing, we often see pole mounted, I said pole mounted and strand mounted devices, and you'll see that we have the E32 here. So it eliminates, land acquisition and permitting delays is one of the things that we look at, because it's a deploy anywhere design. But the big thing on this diagram is the fact that it's showing fiber to the premise with wireless backhaul. So wireless backhaul is essentially when the core, the fiber network is connected to sub networks toward the edge and before the end users, and it allows end users to connect to the sub network. So as I mentioned before, fiber is run to the cellular tower, to the 5G tower, for example, and then users connect to that tower. So it's still fiber to that point, and then it's distributing out from there. So its role is to increase the network coverage and continue to provide additional services in a different way. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So because we're talking about Illinois and rural America, I wanted to bring up a little bit about agriculture. This is a huge part of the counties represented on this call today. And we discuss connected devices inside a home, but what about connected devices at a farm? So we often see, I know several people have weather stations, could be an irrigation system, soil moisture sensor station. We have here a picture of evaporation sensor on a drone. So basically what this is showing is that all of this is connecting and then sending the data to the cloud, transmitting that data back to the end user on a smartphone. So all of this is a connected device, powered by fast, reliable internet. And if you advance to the next slide, I'll show you some of the output. So internet operated technology can obviously impact your yield. I apologize, a soybean does not have a really good icon, so I use corn. So 40% increase in crop yield, 85% reduction in water consumption, and a 50% reduction in energy use by using different types of agriculture related internet connected operated devices. So this is something that farmers are using all the time already, and how their internet is connecting to these devices. Right now, they're using a lot of wireless technology, whether it be cellular or satellite. Some could be using other technologies, but fixed wireless is probably, and satellite and cellular are probably the key ones in rural areas. But we need to think about how this is expanding. So how is this technology going to explode in the future? And as we continue to talk about technology builds in our service and areas served, we need to think about whether it's fiber or another type of internet service that provides high level speeds that can, speeds and bandwidth that can serve all these connected devices that are going to pop up. It's here to stay. So I think it's quite interesting to think about how it really does impact our culture and how things are changing. If you want to jump to the next slide. So precision ag, little more personal information. My husband is a farmer, and so I know a lot about how they put things together and GPS and map things out, and how amazing it is that they can down to the number of seeds planted, and if they miss a spot, it tells them and it goes back and plants exactly in that location. So much of this GPS right now is either downloaded directly to the tractor or a combine, or it is run by GPS. GPS by satellite. So we will most likely see fiber continue to play a role in rural areas as well. Satellites are also getting more prevalent and getting higher speeds. But fiber is more reliable. And if you have fiber to a specific location and can have a wireless feed directly to your equipment, it's another way that you can connect. Obviously, there are a lot of other applications out there that we have not even mentioned that would benefit our communities. Other agriculture uses, such as monitoring livestock, whether that be water, temperature, things like that. There's a lot of different uses out there that we can look at. I know that this isn't relevant in our area, but I met a cranberry farmer who they monitor the temperature at the cranberry farm to make sure that it doesn't freeze, because if it does, they have to go out there and break the ice. So interesting things that agriculture can use internet for. And so there's a lot out there. And I think that concludes most of my slides. So thank you very much. And are there any questions or?
Thank you, Hillary. Could you talk a little bit about deployment costs, like the difference between a suburban area and maybe a place that might have only like 8 connections per mile?
So deployment costs they greatly differ. So the reason why we've traditionally seen so many urban areas have services first is because the deployment costs are so much less in an urban area. It costs less to run the fiber in an urban area. The reason why a lot of farms don't have fiber to the home yet is because of the exponential cost, which is why there are a lot of them that are served with a fixed wireless option, or a lot of them are going to satellite. We are seeing that change, but the cost is much more expensive to serve that area. However, I think that we are seeing a lot of people want to run fiber to every location that they possibly can, want to serve every home. And the reason behind that is because they see the services on top of that connection, on top of the technology that they can offer, and that will benefit their communities. So we're seeing more people consider, maybe we need to spend the money, and it is a bigger outlay. It's going to be more money, but there is funding for that. There's federal funding and things like that people need to consider. The other thing is we are seeing with some of the other technologies, and I'll use satellite as an example. Some of the satellite technologies aren't quite there yet. I had satellite for quite a while. but it was HughesNet, so it was a geo satellite, but the low Earth orbit satellites are getting there on speed and things like that. But what happens if a satellite provider serves somewhere in your community, out, your rural areas out in your community? They serve an entire area, but they're serving that right now. And so that excludes the service provider that may serve that area later from going out and getting federal funding for that area. Even if the satellite provider doesn't have the speeds that are adequate down the road, you still may not get funding for that area. So it's important to look at who's serving where. And when you put your plan together, think about if I let someone of a lesser quality, I almost say lesser quality, of a lower technology, a different technology, because we're even seeing that with coax is different than fiber. A different technology is serving that area. It could exclude you from different funding options. And so it's important to look at that as well and decide whether it's worth spending the money to go to that location now and plan to go there sooner, rather than later.
Okay. Is it safe to say that the deployment costs like in a suburb might be $3,000 a house, whereas in a rural area it's going to be $10,000 a house?
Yes.
And maybe a little higher, and
That's, yeah, it depends on, yeah, depends on topography.
Okay, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between middle mile and last mile networks?
Yeah, so middle mile is more of your transport. So it's what takes the, it's basically, it's going to be more of your transmission of the, from one carrier to another. So for example, I have internet service here at home, but I have a local provider, and that local provider is connected to, they serve me last mile service, but they lease access from the middle mile providers who transport the data back and forth to other carriers. So that is the middle mile, is where they're serving between the small carriers and the tier 1 carriers who, and often you will have a tier 1, like an AT&T or someone who is running the middle mile. It's not always the case. There's different providers out there, but they're running the middle mile and they transport data back and forth, and they own all the infrastructure for that, and then send it to other providers that terminate on the last mile.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions out there in the audience? I don't see any hands raised.
Hi, this is Vicki.
Hi, Vicki.
Hi, Vicki.
How are you? Okay, just to be clear, so I live in the most remote part of Cumberland County, and we have Starlink. And there's several people getting Starlink in the area. There's never been broadband brought down to the neighborhood or anything. So are you saying we might be excluded because Starlink will serve anywhere?
So that depends. So I will say that Starlink is eligible for some funding sources, and if they decide to upgrade, they could be eligible.
I have an answer
I don't want to talk
I can
bad
help.
about any terminology there. I will say that they have been excluded from some. We are seeing, our funding team is telling us that it could be the way that they draw the maps for the funding, that if the area is reported as served by Starlink, then someone else coming in and wanting to bring fiber to the home in that area may not be able to get the funding for that to serve your area. So I think Hillary Raines is gonna
Go ahead, Hillary Raines.
say something.
Yeah, as far as the BEAD funding, I know that's the one that we're really looking forward to. The number 1 priority for the BEAD funding is fiber. Number 2 is going to be those fixed licensed wireless towers. At this point, satellite technology like Starlink does not meet the federal requirements for reliability. So if you have Starlink, you do not have fiber or a tower in your area, you would still be considered eligible for BEAD funding. So if that helps.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's
Yeah.
my impression too as
And
well.
my house shows that in the bead map that I looked at last night. So
What's the tower? Can you specify about the tower technology?
Yeah, there are licensed fixed wireless towers.
Yeah.
So these are usually line of sight towers. Sometimes they put them on top of silos, grain bins, different areas like that that are tall. They are not preferred because, as Hillary was saying, fiber is so reliable, it's so future proof that the federal government really wants to prioritize that. But in areas where we have a high cost threshold in the BEAD the BEAD funding, and you can see that in our initial proposals on our website. So if you're out in the middle of nowhere where it would cost way too much to run fiber directly to you based on this federal formula, then the towers are kind of the next best thing, with the idea that it's kind of a stopgap. The towers are kind of a stopgap until we can get different funding to get fiber to you. But
Yeah, so I want to clarify too. So on fixed wireless, now that's gotten to be a more complicated kind of technology. Traditionally, we've had the fixed wireless companies that have been operating across rural America have used a lot of unlicensed spectrum, which means essentially the FCC says, well, whoever's using this, it's a battle of the providers, and if there's one provider, there's usually not a problem. But if there's multiple providers using the same spectrum, that can get very messy with interference and so on. And so that's why the unlicensed spectrum, those folks who use that, they don't really count as serving. Those areas are still eligible for BEAD funding because it's unlicensed and therefore less reliable than the licensed. The licensed spectrum is generally owned by the big cellular companies. So the fixed wireless products by T-Mobile and Verizon, whether their home products, they're generally using licensed spectrum, which they own, so no one else can interfere with them. So it is more reliable. And so that's kind of a battle right now of the companies, the WISPA industry, the traditional fixed wireless industry, and then the big cellular carriers for what dollars are eligible where. And so that you might have, Bob's wireless internet in your area, and Bob does a great job, provides 100 by 20 service. But even then, that's not considered really, that doesn't knock out funding for fiber in your area because it's the unlicensed spectrum. And Bob could never afford to buy the spectrum because whoever owns that now, it's all the big players, and they're not going to break it up just and give Bob his 5 square miles over here.
Yeah, and we are seeing some smaller providers that are partnering with some WISPs, some wireless ISPs, and in order to serve their members, they are looking at that as they plan out for BEAD funding. So they're looking at, okay, I can't serve this person because they're located here, but I need to serve them. So how can I partner with someone else to provide that service? And so as they were saying earlier, I mean, there are some combination providers that are trying to provide both so that they can serve that area.
We're also seeing, as we're starting the BEAD challenge process, obviously the wireless towers do have some reliability issues. The further away you are from the tower, if you have trees or you don't have line of sight to the tower, if you have inclement weather, sometimes you have a rainstorm, you don't have internet. So if anyone you're working with says, oh, I'm supposed to have this tower, but my speeds aren't what they're supposed to be, again, make them, have them get with the BEAD challenge and run some speed tests and we'll make sure that they read as eligible if they're not getting what they need to.
Good, thank you. Hillary, thank you so much for the presentation today. We'll make
I
your slide-
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I have a question maybe.
Okay,
So one of our villages in our county is saying that it is served, but when it's all got all the red dots. But when we look it up, it's all blip, and blip is tower based and it's unreliable. So how that it says it's not going to qualify for BEAD money. So how does that work?
Run that challenge. And like I say, if you're not getting the service that that folks are paying for, you know, have as many people in that area do a challenge on that provider as possible, because if we get 6 or more in a particular area, that will trigger an area challenge. And so they will be looked at immediately and say, hey, this whole area says that you're not providing what you're supposed to provide. So
Yeah, and
feel
they
free
should
and
do the
ask us any
survey.
questions about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
they-
survey too. Yeah.
because the survey that we're using, that Nancy has engineered, now uses that challenge speed test as the website. And so that will be good. But remember too, they need to do that speed test multiple times with for it to be an effective challenge. For our purposes on the survey, they just have to do it once, but for the challenge process, they have to do it, I believe, 3 times.
What is the challenge process website, or how do we do that?
We'll put our current website in the chat here. The challenge is not formally launched just yet. We should be able to very soon. So in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Will we be aware of when it's set so we can get it to the press?
Absolutely. The moment we know, you will know.
See,
We're
that's
still
what-
waiting on a couple of approvals.
Good, good. Again, thank you so much, Hillary Cherry and Hillary Rains. This challenge process is complicated. And so you'll need to, you know, if you want to, that's why we love big teams, right? Because you can have some people working on the survey, some people working on the provider interviews. And I think this challenge process, as much as I hate to think so, is going to be one more thing that communities really need to work on. Very time sensitive, intensive kind of activity, because the maps clearly are, obviously everyone thinks they're damaged goods. So we need to do the best we can to make sure that they're as accurate as possible.
And Bill, I just want to mention yesterday on the call, 2 counties came on to give examples of how they're doing local outreach. And so I'm going to put the recording to that in the chat as well.
Oh, good.
And so it'll be kind of the latest and greatest. And I think that when I see Devin Bronstein's follow-up email from that webinar, I can forward it to this cohort if that's
good.
available.
Yeah, the Office of Broadband is devoting a lot of resource to making sure the challenge process is done right and so on. So, you know, we'll keep you informed. You should be subscribed to the Illinois Broadband newsletter. Maybe Reed can put that back in the chat again for folks, because that is every 2 weeks they send that out, and I think they send it out as necessary for critical information. And so that's co-produced by the Office of Broadband and the Broadband Lab in Benton. So it's the latest and greatest kind of stuff on that. But it's kind of a rabbit hole of a whole different world of stuff. So luckily I've been avoiding it because I have people like Reed and Hillary to help be smart about it. So that I'd like to go quickly now.
Hey, I got one more question. This is
Okay.
Vicky. So you put links in the chat, and where do those links go later? Because if I go to the link, then it opens up another screen, and then I can't get back and I can't stay. So where do those links go? Because it's very frustrating here in the in the Netherlands.
Nancy,
You
any
know,
advice on the preserving the chat?
Or send them in the follow-up email.
Yeah,
Or-
I'm recording all of the links that we're sending to put into the follow-up.
Okay, then another thing is, so we've sent out our surveys, people are responding and they're getting dropped off.
And when you say dropped off, does that mean that they stop?
They're trying to do the challenge,
The speed test.
the speed test, and they get dropped off. So not sure what's going on, but this is what I'm hearing.
So when they click on the speed test link, it
Yes.
opens up a new tab. They are
Okay.
supposed to do the speed test and then go back to the survey tab and fill out that question with the results from their speed test.
And that
Okay.
works if they're on the computer, but if they're on their phone, it's just simply kicking them out at that point. So they're having to start over.
We're hearing if they're on their phone doing it, it's just kicking them out, or if
I
that's.
wonder, yeah, let me look at the language because there could be a way to say, make sure to return back to this tab
Okay.
to complete your
then
survey.
you
I
can
can
have the-
add that language if you'd like.
Okay.
Okay, well,
What-
thank you for
what's
letting me
their-
know.
Do we have numbers yet for how many we've had completed?
Yeah, do we have any numbers for how many have been completed?
What county are you from?
Cumberland?
I think Cumberland, let's go up because I put that. Yeah, Cumberland is winning at 357 responses.
Hey, that is great.
We had some issues because some people were using their phones and they were kicking over to the speed test and they
That's
weren't
what she
getting.
said.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm gonna try to add some language to that question to make them
Okay,
aware
thank
that
you.
a new tab opens and they've got to come back to the survey. Thank you for letting me know. And I can do that across the board with the other county surveys.
because
Are these people that don't have a desktop computer or an iPad or tablet that are taking that on their phones?
Apparently that was the issue, yeah.
Yeah. I think we're generally have language in there and encourages people to take it on a computer or a desktop, which helps make sure that they're not necessarily using their cellular connection for that first speed test. So, okay. And Nancy, can you spin around the rooms to see if there are questions on the survey that beyond this?
Absolutely. I can pop into the different breakouts today.
Okay, thank you. So,
And Reed, before we get off, Reed, can you drop in on ours so we can talk about next Thursday?
Sure, will do.
Okay, great.
Good. Thanks, everyone. Hillary, thank you. And we really enjoyed it. Alex has been a good partner in this program to help promote the better understanding. And I should say that Calix is really, in many, their competitors might not like to hear this, but is really a provider of choice, especially for a lot of rural telephone companies, electric co-ops that are deploying in rural areas. Calix comes out of a rural focus and continues to serve that market very well.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here today, and I put my contact information in the chat. If anyone wants to reach out, has any questions, please reach out to me. So I will drop off now, but I really appreciate everything.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I'd said that in the email going out that we want to do our, we could do our visions. That would be great to hear if people have those handy. Kathy Brown, are you available to share your vision? Or how about you, Cheryl?
Good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I've got a toddler in the background that's playing with Paw Patrol stuff. So if you hear a random noise, you'll know what that is. Okay, so our vision statement for Clinton County: to provide accessible and affordable high-speed internet infrastructure that serves and supports the evolving educational, agricultural, healthcare, emergency services, and economic needs of the residents in Clinton County, while also incorporating and respecting the proud rural commitment to agriculture preservation in our county.
Good. That's a mouthful. I like it.
Yes.
Good. Let's go to Sarah in Cumberland. Or Kat.
Oh, they want to know vision
Oh.
statement. I was just gonna tell them we have 5.
Yeah.
But here's yours.
Okay, so can you hear me talking?
Yes.
Okay. Which one?
This is the original.
Okay, so Cumberland County Broadband Committee's mission is to enable all Cumberland County to access strong, reliable, and affordable broadband as a way of encouraging quality of life.
Good. Thank you.
So
Lisa
we
in
have
Crawford.
other versions. I don't want to upset anyone, that we'll work through it and maybe finalize something else. Okay?
Okay, sure. You'll find that this is you'll be adapting the more you learn and the more you wordsmith and some people do the whole mission, vision, values thing. So it's up to you guys how you want to develop this communication tool to realize, to recognize what it is you hope to accomplish and share that with the broader community. Macon County, Tammy?
So,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so our vision statement is growing broadband infrastructure throughout Macon County to enhance the quality of life and foster economic growth for all.
Nice. I like that. Thank you. That's great. And Jennifer in Perry County.
So ours is to establish a robust broadband infrastructure. Oh, my phone, where high-speed, reliable internet is accessible to all, bridging the digital divide and unlocking the full potential of Perry County.
Nice.
Courtesy of Doug
Way to
and
go, Doug.
Chuck.
Good. And let's go back to Kathy Brown. Or is anyone from Logan here today?
Yeah, this is Brett with Logan. Kathy couldn't be on the call. She had a conflict here this morning, and we are still working on that mission statement. So we don't have anything yet for you this morning.
Okay, thank you. Well, great. People approach that vision in a few different ways, and some focus on the technology, some focus on the impact on the community. And so I think both of those approaches are great, especially when they come together. So we're going to go into the breakout rooms now. And really, this is your time for your meeting. So whether it's the vision statement or the survey strategy or planning for Reed and I to visit next week, which will be exciting. Hopefully we'll have some pleasant weather and good travel weather for us to do it. I'll be coming in from Minnesota and Reed from Virginia to join you. So that will be a good time. And or the broadband provider interviews are all big tasks now. That's really what we're going to be doing here for the next multiple weeks is especially the survey, the maps. I think the challenge process is going to come into it. And we may spend some additional time on that to make sure everyone on this group knows all about that. Although the Office of Broadband and Extension Service, I think there's a whole series of webinars about this topic, people getting prepared to think about that challenge. And so, good. And with that, I want to thank everyone and thanks for your attendance, and we'll see you in your communities next week. and keep up the good work. Thank you.
I'll hop over to Cumberland, Brett, before I go to Macon. So, and if anyone else wants me to jump in and talk details, I think I've confirmed with most about the visits, but let me know.
Yeah, you could jump over to Perry too, Reed, please.
Sure will. All right.
Thank you.